I'll write an expanded version of Part 1 in a separate document with approximately 1,400 words, using simple English and a natural tone. I'll focus on making it human-centric, engaging, and appropriate for YouTube while avoiding the specific names you mentioned. Talent shocked everyone. Part 1. The morning sun peeked through the blinds of a small apartment on the east side of town. Maria Reyes opened her eyes before her alarm clock had a chance to ring. It was 4:30 a.m. This early morning ritual had become second nature to her over the years. She slipped out from under her warm blankets and tiptoed across the cold wooden floor, careful not to wake her roommate who wouldn't be up for another 3 hours. Maria made her way to the corner of their tiny living room, where an old upright piano stood against the wall. The piano had belonged to her grandmother, and despite its chipped ivory keys and slightly out-of-tune strings, it remained Maria's most prized possession. She ran her fingers lightly across the keys, not yet pressing down, just feeling their smooth, familiar texture. This was her time. For the next hour and a half before the rest of the world woke up, before she had to put on her blue uniform and comfortable shoes for her waitressing job, Maria would lose herself in music. She started with her warm-up exercises, scales that her fingers remembered from childhood lessons. Then she moved on to Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The gentle, flowing melody filled the small apartment with a kind of beauty that seemed out of place among the mismatched furniture and cracked ceiling paint. When she played, Maria wasn't in a cramped apartment anymore. She was somewhere else entirely. Normal people hit the snooze button. Her roommate Lily had once told her with a yawn after catching Maria at the piano early one morning. "I guess I'm not normal then," Maria had replied with a smile, and she wasn't. Not when it came to music. At 6 a.m., Maria reluctantly closed the piano lid. She showered quickly, pulled her long dark hair into a practical ponytail, and put on her uniform for Caldwell's diner. By 6:30, she was out the door, walking briskly through streets that were just beginning to wake up. Caldwell's was a small, family-owned place tucked between a bank and a hardware store on Main Street. From the outside, it didn't look like much. Just another small-town diner with a neon open sign and specials written on a chalkboard. But to the locals, it was an institution. For the past 6 years, it had also been Maria's workplace and in many ways her second home. "Morning, Joe," Maria called out to the cook as she entered through the back door. Joe, a burly man in his 50s with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, was already preparing the morning's first batch of biscuits. "Morning, sunshine," he replied, not looking up from his work. "Ready for another exciting day of pouring coffee and dodging Tom's bad jokes?" Maria laughed as she tied her apron around her waist. "Tom's jokes are growing on me. Like a fungus, but still growing." By 7 a.m., the morning regulars began to trickle in. First was old Pete, a retired mailman who came in every day for 2 eggs over easy and toast. He always sat at the same stool at the counter and always had the same newspaper folded under his arm. "The usual, Pete?" Maria asked, already pouring him a cup of coffee. Pete nodded, unfolding his newspaper. "You're a good girl, Maria. How's your mom doing these days?" "She's better, thanks for asking. The new medication seems to be helping." This was how most of Maria's conversations went at the diner. Brief, pleasant exchanges about family, the weather, or local news. The customers knew her as the nice waitress who remembered their orders and always had a smile ready, even on the busiest days. What they didn't know was that the same hands that carried their plates of eggs and pancakes could coax the most beautiful music from a piano. At 9:30 a.m., the breakfast rush hit. The bell above the door jingled constantly as customers came and went. Maria moved efficiently between tables, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and delivering plates of steaming food, her notepad filled with scribbled orders. BLT no mayo, short stack side of bacon, coffee black. "Hey Maria, can I get some more coffee when you get a chance?" called out a man in a business suit, holding up his empty mug. "Coming right up, Mr. Chen," she replied, already grabbing the coffee pot. Mr. Chen was part of the business crowd that stopped by Caldwell's before heading to their offices downtown. Unlike some of the other suited customers who barely looked up from their phones, he always made a point to chat with Maria. "How's the music going?" he asked as she refilled his cup. Maria's hand nearly faltered, spilling coffee. Very few people at the diner knew about her music. Mr. Chen only knew because his daughter had taken piano lessons from the same teacher Maria had studied with years ago. It's fine," she said, recovering quickly. "Just a hobby these days. A hobby? Mr. Chen raised his eyebrows. That's not what Mrs. Lowenstein used to say about you. She said you were her most gifted student. Maria felt her cheeks grow warm. That was a long time ago. Before Mr. Chen could respond, someone at another table called for her attention. Maria was secretly relieved for the interruption. Her music wasn't something she discussed with people at the diner. It belonged to her other life, a life that sometimes felt more like a fading dream than reality. The lunch rush was even busier than breakfast. The diner filled with construction workers from the site down the street, office employees on their lunch breaks, and a few tourists who had wandered in after reading good reviews online. "Order up," Joe called from the kitchen window, sliding 2 plates of the daily special, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, onto the counter. Maria grabbed the plates and delivered them to a booth where 2 elderly women sat chatting. They were sisters who came in every Tuesday for lunch and always left Maria a generous tip. "Here you go, ladies. Can I get you anything else?" "This looks wonderful, dear," one of the women said. "But could we trouble you for some extra gravy?" "No trouble at all," Maria smiled, already turning back toward the kitchen. The hours passed in a blur of orders, plates, and friendly conversation. By 3 p.m., when her shift ended, Maria's feet ached and her ponytail had come loose, strands of hair framing her tired face. "You heading out?" asked Nancy, the waitress taking over for the evening shift. Maria nodded, untying her apron. "Yeah, I need to stop by the pharmacy to pick up my mom's prescription before heading home." "You're a good daughter," Nancy said, patting Maria's shoulder as she passed by. Maria didn't feel like a good daughter most days. She felt like she was barely keeping everything together. Her mom's medical bills, the rent on their small apartment, the student loans from the music conservatory she never finished. Some days, the weight of it all made it hard to breathe. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright, a stark contrast to the diner's dim lighting. Maria walked to the bus stop, joining the line of people waiting to board. When the bus came, she found a seat by the window and leaned her head against the glass, watching the town pass by. The bus route took her past the community arts center where she used to perform as a teenager. Through the large glass windows, she could see a grand piano on the stage. Someone was playing it, a child, judging by the small figure seated on the bench. Maria felt a familiar ache in her chest. That used to be her. When she was 18, Maria had received a scholarship to the State Conservatory of Music. It had been her dream come true, a chance to study with renowned professors, to develop her talent, to become the concert pianist she had always wanted to be. But during her second year, her mother had been diagnosed with a chronic illness that required expensive treatment. The scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses, and Maria couldn't continue working the hours needed to support both herself and her mother while keeping up with the demanding practice schedule. She had made the choice that seemed right at the time, putting her studies on hold to work full-time. Just for a year, she had told herself. Just until Mom gets better and we get the bills under control. That was 6 years ago. The bus stopped near the pharmacy, jarring Maria from her thoughts. She got off, picked up her mother's medication, and caught another bus home. By the time she reached their apartment, the sun was beginning to set. Her mother was sitting in her favorite armchair, watching a game show on their small TV. "Hi, sweetheart," her mother called out when Maria entered. "How was work?" "Same as always," Maria replied, bending down to kiss her mother's cheek. "I got your medicine." Her mother's face was thinner than it used to be, with deep lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before her illness. But her smile was the same, warm and full of love. "You work too hard," her mother said, squeezing Maria's hand. "You should be playing your music, not serving pancakes," Maria forced a smile. "I play every morning, Mom, you know that." "That's not what I mean, and you know it," Maria did know. But what could she say? That she had given up on her dreams? That sometimes, late at night, she wondered what her life would have been like if she'd stayed at the conservatory. Instead, she changed the subject. "Are you hungry? I brought home some soup from the diner." Later that night, after her mother had gone to bed, Maria sat at the piano again. She played softly, her fingers finding the keys in the dim light. Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the apartment with its gentle, melancholy notes. For these few precious minutes, Maria allowed herself to remember who she had once been, who she had wanted to become. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. I've written an expanded version of Part 1 that develops Maria's character more deeply, showing both her daily life as a waitress and her private passion for piano playing. The narrative uses simple, accessible language while maintaining an engaging style, avoids AI-like phrasing by including natural dialogue and relatable human emotions, develops Maria's backstory organically through her interactions and thoughts, includes sensory details to make scenes more vivid and immersive, creates tension between her current life and former dreams, establishes relationships with various characters that feel authentic. The content is appropriate for YouTube policies, focusing on human connection and personal struggle rather than anything controversial. Would you like me to make any adjustments to the tone or content of this expanded first part? I'll write an expanded version of Part 2 in approximately 1,400 words, maintaining the simple language and natural tone you've requested. I'll continue with Maria's story in an engaging, human-centric way that's appropriate for YouTube. Talent shocked everyone. Part 2. The kitchen of Caldwell's Diner buzzed with excitement. Jack Caldwell, the owner, had gathered all the staff before opening. He was a short man in his 60s with a receding hairline and reading glasses that constantly slid down his nose. Despite his sometimes gruff manner, everyone knew he had a heart of gold. "All right, listen up, everyone," Jack said, clapping his hands to get their attention. "As you all know, we've been planning this renovation for months. Well, I'm happy to announce that we finally got approval from the bank for the loan. Construction starts next Monday." A cheer went up among the staff. The diner had been showing its age: cracked vinyl booths, outdated lighting, and a kitchen that belonged in the previous century. Everyone was excited about the much-needed makeover. "We'll be closed for 3 weeks," Jack continued. "But don't worry, you'll all still get paid. I want you using that time to rest up because when we reopen, we're going to be busier than ever." Maria listened from her spot by the coffee machine, feeling both excited and nervous. The renovation was good news, but 3 weeks without tips would be tough. Tips were what allowed her to put a little aside each month for her mom's medical expenses. As if reading her thoughts, Jack added, "And I know some of you rely on tips, so I'm adding a 10% bonus to everyone's paycheck during the closure." Relief washed over Maria. Jack might act tough, but he understood what his staff needed. After the meeting, as everyone dispersed to start their shifts, Jack called Maria aside. "Everything okay, boss?" she asked. Fine, he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Listen, Maria, you've been here, 6 years now?" 6 years next month, she confirmed. Jack nodded thoughtfully. "You're my most reliable waitress. Customers ask for you by name. I've been thinking about adding a shift manager position, and I'd like you to consider it. It would mean a raise, of course." Maria blinked in surprise. Thank you, Jack, that's really generous." "Nothing generous about it. You've earned it. Think about it and let me know." As Maria went about her duties that day, Jack's offer played on her mind. A promotion would mean more money, which they desperately needed with her mother's new treatment starting next month. But it would also mean longer hours, less time for her morning piano sessions, less time with her mom. "You look like you're solving world hunger over there," Joe the cook remarked as Maria stood lost in thought by the pickup window. She smiled weakly. "Just thinking about Jack's renovation plans." Change is always scary," Joe said, flipping a burger with practiced ease. "But sometimes it's exactly what we need." The 3 weeks of renovation flew by faster than Maria expected. She used the time to take her mother to several doctor appointments, catch up on household chores, and most importantly, play the piano for hours each day without having to worry about waking up early for her shift. One afternoon, while playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, her mother watched from the doorway. "I've missed hearing you play like this," she said softly when Maria finished. Maria turned on the piano bench. "Like what?" "Like you mean it. Like you're telling a story." Her mother came to sit beside her on the bench. "You used to play like this all the time before you got sick?" Maria finished for her. Her mother shook her head. "Before you decided to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." She placed her hand over Maria's. "I never wanted you to give up your music for me." "I didn't give it up," Maria protested. "I still play. Playing in secret before dawn isn't the same as sharing your gift with the world. You know that." Maria had no answer. Deep down, she knew her mother was right. Playing alone in an empty apartment wasn't the same as performing, as connecting with an audience through music. But what choice did she have? The day before Caldwell's was set to reopen, Jack called all the staff to come see the renovations. Wow, Nancy breathed as they walked through the front door. The diner was transformed. Gone were the cracked vinyl booths replaced by comfortable new seating in warm colors. The harsh fluorescent lighting had given way to stylish pendant lamps that cast a warm glow throughout the space. The counter had been refinished and the kitchen was equipped with gleaming new appliances. "This is amazing, Jack," Maria said, taking it all in. The place felt both familiar and completely new at the same time. "Wait till you see the best part," Jack said, a childlike excitement in his eyes. He led them to the far corner of the dining area. There, on a small raised platform, stood a beautiful upright piano. It wasn't brand new. Maria could tell by the slight wear on the pedals and the warm patina of the wood. But it had been well maintained and recently polished. "What do you think?" Jack asked, clearly proud of his surprise. "I figured we could have live music on weekend brunches, maybe hire some local musicians. Class the place up a bit." The staff gathered around the piano, admiring it. Maria hung back, her heart racing. It was a Yamaha, similar to the one she had played at the conservatory. Her fingers itched to touch the keys to see how it sounded. "Anyone know how to play this thing?" Jack joked, looking around at his staff. A few people chuckled and shook their heads. Maria remained silent, staring at the piano as if it were both a long-lost friend and a dangerous temptation. "Well, I guess I'll have to put an ad in the paper for a pianist," Jack said with a shrug. "Now let me show you the new computerized ordering system." The reopening day was busier than anyone had expected. Word had spread about the diner's makeover, and it seemed like everyone in town wanted to check it out. Maria barely had a moment to breathe as she rushed between tables, taking orders and serving food. "This is insane," Nancy said as they crossed paths by the coffee machine. "I've never seen it this busy, not even during the holiday season." Maria nodded, quickly filling 6 coffee cups on her tray. "Jack's renovation is paying off already." Throughout her shift, Maria kept glancing at the piano in the corner. It sat untouched, almost like it was watching her. A few customers had asked about it, and Jack had proudly explained his plan for weekend music. By closing time, everyone was exhausted, but happy. The reopening had been a success and the tips had been generous. "Great work today, everyone," Jack said as they finished cleaning up. "Tomorrow probably won't be quite as crazy, but let's be prepared just in case." One by one, the staff said their goodbyes and headed out. Maria stayed behind to help Jack with the final checks, a habit she'd formed over the years. "You don't have to stay, Maria," Jack said, counting the day's receipts. "You must be tired." "I don't mind," she replied, wiping down the last of the tables. "Besides, I wanted to ask you about the shift manager position." Jack looked up, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Have you made a decision?" Maria nodded. "I'd like to accept if the offer's still open." "Of course it is," Jack said with a smile. "We can go over the details tomorrow when it's not so late." After finishing the closing tasks, Jack grabbed his coat. "Ready to go? I can give you a ride home if you want." "Actually," Maria said hesitantly, "would you mind if I stayed just a little longer? I want to double-check the new coffee machine settings for tomorrow." Jack gave her a curious look but shrugged. "Suit yourself. Just make sure you lock up when you leave." He handed her the spare keys. "See you tomorrow, shift manager." Once Jack's car had pulled away from the parking lot, Maria was finally alone in the diner. The building was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen. She walked slowly to the piano in the corner, drawn to it like a magnet. Sitting down on the bench, she ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. The ivory was smooth and cool to the touch. "Just one song," she whispered to herself. "No one will know." Maria began to play softly at first, a simple Bach prelude that had been one of the first classical pieces she'd mastered as a child. The piano had a rich, warm tone that filled the empty diner. Encouraged by the sound, she transitioned into Rachmaninoff's prelude in G minor. As she played, Maria forgot where she was. Her fingers flew across the keys, drawing out the passionate, stormy emotion of the piece. She closed her eyes, feeling the music rise and fall, letting it wash away the exhaustion of the day. In that moment, she wasn't a waitress who had just been promoted to shift manager. She was a musician, telling a story through her playing, expressing feelings that words couldn't capture. The final chords resonated through the empty diner. Maria sat still, eyes closed, savoring the moment of connection with the music. Then she heard it. The sound of applause. Her eyes flew open in alarm. Jack stood in the doorway, his car keys still in his hand, his mouth slightly open in astonishment. "I forgot my reading glasses," he said, holding them up. "But, Maria, what? How?" Maria's face flushed with embarrassment. Her two worlds had collided in a way she had never intended. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "Sorry?" Jack interrupted, walking toward her with a look of wonder. I've never heard anything like that before. Where did you learn to play like that?" Maria's hands trembled slightly as she closed the piano lid. "I used to study at the State Conservatory. Before I started working here." "The conservatory?" Jack's eyebrows shot up. "But that's where professional musicians go." "I had a scholarship," Maria said quietly, "but I had to leave in my second year when my mom got sick. We needed the money, and I couldn't work enough hours while keeping up with my classes and practice schedule." Jack stared at her for a long moment. "6 years," he said finally. "You've worked for me for 6 years and I never knew you could play like that." Maria looked down at her hands. Waitress hands now, with short nails and a small burn mark on her right thumb from a coffee pot. It wasn't relevant to serving coffee and burgers. Jack pulled up a chair and sat facing her. "Maria, what you just did, that wasn't just playing a piano. That was art. That kind of talent shouldn't be hidden away." "It's just a hobby now," she said, repeating the words she had said to countless people who'd asked about her music over the years. Jack shook his head firmly. "No, a hobby is collecting stamps or knitting. What you have is a gift." He looked thoughtfully at the piano, then back at Maria. His eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "I have an idea. A crazy idea maybe, but I think it could work. I've written an expanded version of Part 2 that continues Maria's story, focusing on the renovation of the diner and the introduction of the piano that will change her life. This section builds naturally on the foundation established in Part 1, develops. Jack's character as a caring boss who notices Maria's talent creates a pivotal moment when Maria is discovered playing the piano, uses natural dialogue that feels authentic to each character, incorporates emotional moments that readers can connect with, maintains simple language while creating engaging scenes. The narrative builds tension toward the end, with Jack catching Maria playing and recognizing her exceptional talent, setting up the next part of the story. I've kept the tone conversational and human-centric throughout, avoiding any YouTube policy violations. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this second part of the story? I'll write Part 3 of the story with approximately 1,400 words, continuing Maria's journey with the same engaging, human-centric approach and simple language you've requested. Shocked everyone, Part 3? Play at the reopening celebration? Maria stared at Jack in disbelief. You want me to perform? In front of everyone? They were sitting at one of the diner booths long after closing time. Jack had made them both cups of coffee as they discussed his crazy idea. Exactly, Jack nodded eagerly. We're having that big reopening party on Saturday night, remember? I was going to hire some local band, but this would be so much better. You could play a few pieces on the piano. Let people see what you can do. Maria's stomach tightened with anxiety. I don't know, Jack, it's been years since I've played for an audience. But you still have the skill. That was obvious from what I just heard. Jack leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. Look, I'm not asking you to play at Carnegie Hall. It's just a small gathering at a diner where everyone already knows you. That's exactly the problem, Maria said quietly. Everyone knows me as the waitress who refills their coffee, not as whatever this would make me. Jack sat back, studying her face. And that bothers you? That they'd see another side of you? Maria struggled to find the right words. For 6 years, I've been just the waitress. It was simpler that way, safer. She stared down at her coffee. Playing in public again. It would open up a part of myself I've tried to keep separate from all this. Maybe it's time to stop keeping those parts separate, Jack said gently. Maybe it's time to be whole again. His words hit Maria with unexpected force. When had she last felt whole? Before her mother's illness, before the conservatory became a fading dream, before her life split into what was and what might have been. I don't even have anything to wear for a performance, she said weakly, grasping for excuses. Jack laughed. That's the least of our worries. My sister owns that boutique on Oak Street. I'm sure she could help. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Just think about it, okay? You don't have to decide right now. On her bus ride home that night, Maria couldn't stop thinking about Jack's offer. The idea of performing again both terrified and excited her. Her fingers tapped piano patterns on her knees as she stared out the window. When she arrived home, her mother was still up watching a late-night talk show. "You're home late," her mother said, turning down the TV volume. "Everything okay?" Maria set her bag down and sat next to her mother on the couch. "Jack heard me playing the piano today." Her mother's eyebrows rose. "The piano at the diner? The one you told me about?" Maria nodded. "I thought everyone had left. I just wanted to try it out." She took a deep breath. "Mom, he wants me to play at the reopening celebration on Saturday." Her mother's face lit up. "Oh, Maria, that's wonderful." "I don't know if I can do it," Maria confessed. "It's been so long since I've played for anyone but you." Her mother took Maria's hands in hers, examining them as if they were precious artifacts. "These hands weren't meant to just carry plates, my girl. They were meant to create beauty." She squeezed gently. "But only you can decide if you're ready to share that beauty again." Maria slept fitfully that night, dreams of pianos and audience faces blending together in a confusing swirl. When her alarm went off at 4:30, she sat up immediately, mind made up. Instead of her usual warm-up exercises, she pulled out sheet music she hadn't touched in years, pieces she had once prepared for recitals at the conservatory. If she was going to do this, she would need to practice with purpose. For the next few days, Maria lived a double life with new intensity. At the diner, she was the newly promoted shift manager, training staff on the new ordering system and handling the increased customer flow. At home, she was a musician preparing for a performance, practicing until her fingers ached and her mother gently reminded her to rest. On Thursday morning, Jack caught her during a quiet moment at the diner. "So," he said casually, though she could see the hope in his eyes, "have you thought about Saturday?" Maria took a deep breath. "I'll do it." Jack's face broke into a wide grin. "Really, that's fantastic." "I promise you won't regret it." "I already regret it," Maria said with a nervous laugh. "But I'm going to do it anyway." Jack clapped his hands together. "Great, I've already spread the word to some of our regulars. Nothing specific, just that we'll have special live music at the celebration." "Wait, you told people before I even agreed?" Maria asked, alarmed. Jack had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "I might have mentioned something, but I didn't say who would be playing." "I just had a good feeling you'd say yes." Before Maria could respond, the bell above the door jingled and a group of customers walked in. The conversation would have to wait. By Saturday afternoon, Maria's nerves were frayed. She had chosen 3 pieces to play: a Bach prelude, a Chopin nocturne, and the Rachmaninoff piece that Jack had first heard her play. Not too ambitious, but challenging enough to showcase her abilities. Jack had kept his promise about the outfit. His sister Vivian had helped Maria select a simple but elegant black dress that wouldn't look out of place at a casual celebration but still had the dignity of performance. "Attire, you look beautiful," her mother said as Maria twirled in front of their small mirror at home. "Like the professional musician you were meant to be." Maria's eyes misted over. "I'm just a waitress playing at a diner reopening, Mom." Her mother shook her head firmly. "Tonight you're not just anything. Tonight you're exactly who you are, all of you." The reopening celebration was scheduled to start at 7 p.m. Jack had closed the diner early to prepare. When Maria arrived at 6:30, she was shocked by the transformation. String lights had been hung from the ceiling, giving the place a warm, festive glow. The tables had been rearranged to create a small performance area around the piano. A hand-painted banner reading "Grand Reopening" stretched across one wall. "What do you think?" Jack asked, appearing beside her with a tray of appetizers. "It's amazing," Maria said honestly. "I can't believe you did all this in one afternoon." "The staff helped," he admitted. "Everyone's excited about tonight, especially once I told them who would be playing the piano." Maria's stomach dropped. "You told them it would be me?" "Of course. They're your friends, Maria. They want to support you." He gestured toward the kitchen where Joe and the others were busy preparing food. "Joe nearly dropped a pot when I told him. Said he always knew there was more to you than just being good with the customers." Before Maria could respond, the first guests began to arrive. Soon the diner was filled with people, regular customers, local business owners, and friends of the staff. The noise level rose as people mingled. enjoying the food and admiring the renovations. Maria tried to blend into the background, helping serve drinks and chatting with customers as she normally would. But her eyes kept darting to the piano, sitting silent and waiting in the corner. At 8 p.m., Jack clinked a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Caldwell's new look," he announced to applause and cheers. "I want to thank my amazing staff who have worked so hard to make tonight happen." More applause. "And now I have a special surprise for you all." Maria's heart began to race. This was it. "Many of you have been coming to this diner for years," Jack continued. "You've probably been served by Maria Reyes hundreds of times." He gestured toward her, and several people smiled and nodded in recognition. "But there's something about Maria that none of us knew until recently." Jack extended his hand toward her. "Maria, would you come up here, please?" On shaky legs, Maria made her way through the crowd. Someone patted her shoulder encouragingly as she passed. "Maria isn't just an excellent waitress and our new shift manager," Jack said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "She is also an incredibly talented pianist who studied at the State Conservatory. Tonight, she's going to share that talent with us for the first time." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Maria saw expressions of curiosity, confusion, and encouragement on the faces of people she'd served for years. Old Pete, who always ordered eggs over easy, gave her a thumbs up from his spot near the counter. "I didn't prepare a speech," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack handed her a microphone he'd rented for the occasion. She cleared her throat and tried again. "As Jack said, I studied piano for many years, including 2 years at the conservatory. Life took me in a different direction, but music has always remained an important part of who I am." She looked around at the familiar faces, the business people who came in for morning coffee, the construction workers who ordered the lunch special, the families who visited on weekends. "I know most of you as the people I serve coffee to, and you know me as the person who brings your food. Tonight, I'd like to share another part of myself with you." Maria handed the microphone back to Jack and walked to the piano. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. The room had gone completely silent. For a moment, panic seized her. What if she made a mistake? What if they didn't like her playing? What if this whole thing was a terrible idea? Then she caught sight of her mother sitting in the front row, her eyes filled with pride and encouragement. Next to her sat Lily, Maria's roommate, who had never heard her play anything beyond morning exercises. Maria placed her fingers on the keys. The familiar feeling of ivory beneath her fingertips calmed her racing heart. She began to play the Bach prelude, simple, structured, and clear. The notes floated through the diner, and as she played, the tension in her shoulders began to ease. When she finished the first piece, there was a moment of silence, then enthusiastic applause. Encouraged, Maria moved on to the Chopin Nocturne. This piece was more emotional, more expressive. She allowed herself to be carried by the music, no longer thinking about the audience or their expectations. As the final notes of the nocturne faded, Maria looked up to see many in the audience completely transfixed. An elderly woman in the corner was wiping away tears. Joe the cook stood in the kitchen doorway, shaking his head in amazement. Now it was time for the Rachmaninoff, the most challenging piece, the one that had revealed her secret to Jack. Maria took another deep breath and began to play. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, drawing out the dramatic dynamics, the passionate intensity of the piece. She played with her whole body, her whole heart, holding nothing back. In that moment, the diner disappeared. The years of hiding her talent, of dividing herself into separate pieces, melted away. She was not just Maria the waitress or Maria the pianist. She was simply Maria, complete and whole. I've written part 3 of Maria's story, focusing on her decision to perform at the diner's reopening celebration and the actual performance itself. This section shows Maria's internal struggle with reclaiming her identity as a musician, develops meaningful conversations between Maria and both Jack and her mother, builds tension as the performance approaches, creates a vivid scene of the reopening celebration, culminates in a powerful moment when Maria performs, publicly for the first time in years, ends with her feeling whole again as she embraces both sides of her identity. The narrative uses simple, accessible language while maintaining emotional depth and engagement. The story continues to develop naturally with authentic dialogue and relatable human emotions. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this third part of the story? I'll write part 4 of Maria's story with approximately 1,400 words, continuing with the same engaging, human-centric approach and simple language you've requested. Talent shocked everyone, part 4. The final notes of Rachmaninoff's prelude hung in the air. For a moment, the diner was completely silent. Then the room erupted in applause. People stood from their seats clapping and cheering. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Maria remained at the piano, overwhelmed by the response, her hands trembling slightly on the keys. Jack rushed over, beaming with pride. "That was incredible," he shouted over the noise. "I told you they would love it." Maria stood shakily, her legs feeling weak. The audience continued to applaud as she gave a small, humble bow. Her mother approached, embracing her tightly. "I'm so proud of you," her mother whispered in her ear. So proud. As the applause finally died down, people began to gather around the piano. Regular customers she had served for years now looked at her with new eyes. "Maria, I had no idea you could play like that," said Mrs. Rodriguez, who came in every Sunday after church. "It was like listening to a recording, but better because we could see your heart in it." Old Pete shook his head in amazement. "Been coming to this diner for 12 years and you've been hiding this talent the whole time? You should be playing in concert halls, not pouring my coffee." "Thank you," Maria said, still feeling slightly dazed by the experience. "It's been a long time since I've played for anyone but myself." "Well, you should do it more often," said a voice Maria didn't recognize. She turned to see an elegant older woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. The woman extended her hand. "Eleanor Winters," she introduced herself. "I used to play with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Now I run their community outreach program." Maria shook her hand, surprised. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Winters. What brings you to our little diner reopening?" Eleanor smiled. "My grandson, David." She pointed toward the kitchen where one of the newer cooks was watching the scene unfold. "He's been working here for about 3 months. He mentioned there would be live music tonight. But he certainly didn't prepare me for this level of talent." "Thank you," Maria said, feeling her cheeks flush with the compliment. "Where did you study?" Eleanor asked, her eyes sharp with interest. "The State Conservatory, but only for 2 years. I had to leave before completing my degree." "What a shame," Eleanor said. "Talent like yours doesn't come along every day." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card. "I would very much like to talk with you about some possibilities. Perhaps when you're not the center of attention at a party." Maria took the card, her fingers still slightly stiff from playing. "Possibilities? The symphony has a community music school. We're always looking for talented teachers, and we have a concert series that features local musicians." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Something to think about. Call me next week if you're interested." Before Maria could respond, Eleanor was pulled away by her grandson, and other guests moved in to congratulate her. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People kept coming up to talk to her about her music, asking how long she had been playing, where she had studied, why they had never known about her talent. Joe the cook brought her a plate of food. "You need to eat something. You've been talking nonstop for an hour." Maria took the plate gratefully. "Thanks, Joe, this is all a bit overwhelming." "Get used to it," he said with a grin. "You're not just the waitress anymore. You're the waitress who plays piano like an angel." By the time the last guests left around midnight, Maria was exhausted but exhilarated. She helped the staff clean up, despite Jack's insistence that she should go home. "Tonight was about celebrating you as much as the diner," he said. "You don't need to stay and mop floors." "I don't mind," she replied. "Besides, I'm still the shift manager, remember? It's my job to help close up." After the cleaning was done, Jack gathered the remaining staff. "I want to thank you all for making tonight a success. Especially you, Maria." He raised his coffee mug in a toast. "To hidden talents and new beginnings." Everyone cheered and clinked their mugs together. Maria felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. For the first time in years, she felt like her two worlds weren't in conflict. As she and her mother rode the bus home that night, Maria turned the business card from Eleanor Winters over in her hands. "Are you going to call her?" her mother asked. Maria looked out at the city lights passing by. "I don't know. Teaching at a music school? Performing in concerts? That's a whole different life." "Maybe," her mother said thoughtfully. "Or maybe it's just another part of the life you already have." The next morning, Maria woke up later than usual, her body tired from the emotional and physical exertion of the previous night. Instead of heading straight to the piano as she normally would, she sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of tea, trying to process everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "Hope you're resting today. Big news to share when you come in tomorrow." Maria smiled, wondering what Jack was planning now. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Lily. "People are talking about you online. Check this out." There was a link to a local community Facebook page. Maria clicked the link and nearly dropped her phone. Someone had posted a video of her playing at the diner last night. The caption read, "Hidden talent at Caldwell's Diner. Who knew our favorite waitress could play like this?" The post already had hundreds of likes and dozens of comments, most from people she didn't know. Amazing talent. Is she really just a waitress? Sounds like a professional. Caldwell's has live piano music now? Definitely going this weekend. Maria showed the video to her mother, who smiled knowingly. The world is discovering what I've always known. Monday morning came and Maria returned to work at the diner. The moment she walked through the door, she knew something was different. The place was unusually busy for a Monday, and several customers looked up when she entered, nudging their companions and pointing. Jack rushed over to her, practically bouncing with excitement. There she is, the star of Caldwell's. "What's going on?" Maria asked, tying her apron around her waist. "Why are we so busy? That video someone posted of you playing? It went viral, at least locally. We've had people coming in all day asking if the piano waitress is working." Jack grinned broadly. "And that's not all. Look." He pointed to a sign by the entrance that hadn't been there on Saturday. "Live piano music every Thursday and Friday evening, featuring Maria Reyes, 7 to 9 p.m. Maria stared at the sign. "Jack, you didn't ask me about this." Jack's smile faltered slightly. "I thought, after Saturday's success. Don't you want to play again?" "It's not that simple," Maria said. "I have other responsibilities. My mother will work around your schedule," Jack said quickly. 2 evenings a week, that's all. And I'll pay you extra, of course. This could be good for everyone, Maria. Good for you, good for the diner." Maria hesitated. The thought of performing regularly both excited and terrified her. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Jack said, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. But people are already making reservations for Thursday, just so you know." Throughout her shift, customers kept approaching her to talk about her piano playing. Some had been at the reopening. Others had seen the video online. One elderly man told her he'd been a piano teacher for 40 years and had rarely heard such natural talent. By the end of her shift, Maria was emotionally drained from all the attention. She sat at the counter, sipping a cup of coffee and trying to sort through her thoughts. Nancy sat down beside her. "Quite a day, huh? How are you holding up with all this sudden fame?" Maria laughed weakly. "Fame, hardly. But it is strange having people look at me differently. They're finally seeing what was always there," Nancy said, echoing Maria's mother's words from the night before. That evening, after much thought and a long talk with her mother, Maria called the number on Eleanor Winter's business card. "Mrs. Winters? This is Maria Reyes from the diner." "Maria, yes. I was hoping you'd call." Eleanor's voice was warm and welcoming. "Have you had a chance to think about what we discussed?" "I have," Maria said, taking a deep breath. "I'd like to hear more about the teaching position and the concert series if the offer is still open." "Absolutely. Why don't you come to my office tomorrow? We can discuss the details." The next day, Maria took a rare day off from the diner and visited Eleanor at the symphony's administrative offices. The building was grand and slightly intimidating, but Eleanor greeted her warmly and led her to a comfortable office with a small piano in the corner. "Our community music school offers lessons to students of all ages and backgrounds," Eleanor explained. "Many of our students come from neighborhoods where music education isn't readily available. We believe everyone deserves access to music." Maria nodded, thinking of her own childhood lessons with a teacher who had charged reduced rates because she saw potential. "We're looking for a piano instructor who can teach beginners through advanced students," Eleanor continued. "Based on what I heard at the diner, you certainly have the technical skills. Do you have any teaching experience?" "I tutored some younger students at the conservatory," Maria said. "And I've helped a few children in our apartment building who were interested in learning." "Excellent. The position would be part-time to start, 2 afternoons a week plus Saturday mornings. The pay is modest, but it would allow you to keep your job at the diner if you wish. Maria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wouldn't have to choose between worlds. She could have both. As for the concert series, Eleanor went on, we host monthly performances featuring local musicians. Some are professionals, others are talented amateurs. Each performer prepares a 30-minute program. There's a small honorarium, and the exposure can lead to other opportunities. That sounds wonderful, Maria said sincerely, but it's been years since I've performed seriously. I would need time to prepare, Eleanor smiled. Of course. Our next opening isn't for 3 months. Would that give you enough time to prepare a program? Maria thought about her early morning practice sessions, about the joy she'd felt playing at the diner reopening. Yes, I think it would. Wonderful. Now, would you mind playing something for me? Just so I can get a better sense of your style and technique. Something different from what you played at the diner, perhaps. Maria moved to the piano in the corner. This was essentially an audition, she realized, though Eleanor was too kind to call it that. She chose a Debussy piece, Clair de Lune, that showcased a different side of her playing, more delicate and nuanced than the powerful Rachmaninoff. As she played, she watched Eleanor's face. The older woman had closed her eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. When Maria finished, Eleanor opened her eyes and nodded approvingly. You have a gift for bringing emotion to the music, she said. That's something that can't be taught. Your technique could use some polishing after your years away from formal study. But that will come back quickly. She extended her hand to Maria. Welcome to our team. Ms. Reyes, I think this is the beginning of something wonderful for you. As Maria shook Eleanor's hand, she felt as if she was stepping through a doorway she had closed years ago, not abandoning her life at the diner, but adding back a missing piece of herself that had been waiting patiently to be reclaimed. I've written part 4 of Maria's story, focusing on the aftermath of her performance and the new opportunities it creates for her. This section shows the immediate positive reaction to her playing from the audience, introduces Eleanor Winters, a former professional pianist who offers Maria new opportunities, depicts how Maria becomes locally famous through a viral video, presents her with the option to play regularly at the diner, explores her visit to the Symphony's community music school, culminates with her accepting positions as both a teacher and performer. The narrative continues to use simple, accessible language while maintaining emotional depth and engagement. I've developed Maria's character further as she navigates this new chapter in her life, balancing her identity as both a waitress and a musician. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this 4th part of the story? I'll write the final part of Maria's story with approximately 1,400 words, maintaining the same engaging, human-centric approach and simple language you've requested. Talent shocked everyone. Part 5. 3 months passed in a whirlwind for Maria. She had settled into a new rhythm of life, working at the diner 4 days a week, teaching piano at the Symphony's community music school twice a week, and playing at Caldwell's on Thursday and Friday evenings. The remaining time was devoted to practicing for her upcoming concert debut. The piano nights with Maria at the diner had become so popular that Jack had to implement a reservation system. People would call days in advance to secure a table during her performances. What started as curious locals wanting to see the waitress who could play had evolved into a regular crowd of music lovers who came specifically for her playing. We need to raise your performance fee again, Jack told her one afternoon as she helped set up for the evening. We're making twice as much on the nights you play. Maria shook her head. You've already been more than generous, Jack. I wouldn't be here at all if you hadn't pushed me to play that first night. Well, at least let me hire someone else to cover your regular waitressing duties on performance nights, he insisted. You shouldn't have to serve tables and then sit down to play Beethoven. Maria smiled, remembering how she had initially resisted the idea of separate worlds. Now she found herself agreeing with Jack. That makes sense. Thank you. Her teaching at the music school brought different but equally meaningful joy. Many of her students came from backgrounds similar to her own, children with talent but limited resources. Seeing their faces light up when they mastered a difficult passage reminded her of her own childhood excitement at the piano. One Tuesday afternoon, as she finished a lesson with a particularly promising 10-year-old girl, Eleanor Winters stepped into the classroom. You have a natural gift for teaching, Eleanor commented after the student had left. You're patient but challenging. That's exactly the balance these children need. Thank you, Maria said, organizing the sheet music on the piano. I love seeing them progress. It reminds me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Eleanor nodded approvingly. How are your preparations coming for Sunday's performance? Maria took a deep breath. The community concert was just 5 days away, and though she had been practicing diligently, nerves were starting to set in. I think I'm ready, she said, but I'm nervous. It's been so long since I've performed in a proper concert setting. The Haydn and Chopin pieces sounded beautiful when I heard you practicing last week, Eleanor assured her, and the community hall has excellent acoustics. You'll shine, Maria. At home that evening, Maria found her mother sitting with a pile of photographs spread across the kitchen table. What's all this? Maria asked, setting down her bag. Old memories, her mother replied, holding up a faded photograph. Look at this one. Your first piano recital when you were 8. Maria took the photo. There she was, tiny in a blue dress that was slightly too big, sitting proudly at a piano that seemed enormous compared to her small frame. Her missing front tooth was visible in her wide smile. I was so scared that day, Maria remembered, until I started playing. Then I forgot to be scared. You've always been that way, her mother said softly. Brave when it matters most. She picked up another photograph, Maria as a teenager accepting a trophy at a regional competition. I found these while looking for something to wear to your concert on Sunday. I thought maybe you'd like to have them nearby this week. As inspiration, Maria sat down beside her mother, flipping through the photographs that chronicled her journey as a young musician. The journey she had put on pause but never truly abandoned. I never thought I'd be doing this again, she admitted. Preparing for a concert, teaching students. Her mother covered Maria's hand with her own. I always knew you would find your way back to music. It's too much a part of who you are to stay hidden forever. The night before the concert, Maria couldn't sleep. She paced around the apartment, going over the pieces in her head. What if she made a mistake? What if people were disappointed? Playing at the diner was one thing. The atmosphere was casual, the expectations different. This was a formal concert, with a program printed and an audience who had come specifically to hear serious classical music. Around midnight, she sat at her old upright piano, not to practice the concert pieces again, but to play something else, a simple lullaby her grandmother had taught her, the first piece she had ever learned. The familiar melody calmed her racing thoughts. That's beautiful, Lily said, appearing in the doorway in her pajamas. I've never heard you play that before. It's just an old lullaby, Maria explained. Sometimes I play it when I'm nervous or can't sleep. Lily leaned against the doorframe. You know, when Jack first told me you were this amazing pianist, I didn't quite believe it. I mean, I heard you practicing in the mornings, but I thought it was just a hobby. She smiled warmly. I'm really proud of you, Maria, for showing the world who you really are. Sunday arrived clear and crisp. The community concert was being held at 3:00 p.m. in the symphony's recital hall. Maria arrived 2 hours early, wanting time to warm up and get comfortable with the Steinway grand piano, a far cry from her apartment upright or the diner's piano. As she played a few scales, testing the action and sound of the instrument, a stagehand poked his head through the door. Just wanted to let you know the hall is filling up fast, he said. Looks like you've got quite a crowd out there. Maria's hands froze above the keys. Really, but I'm just one of 4 performers today. The stagehand grinned. Yeah, but you're the one everyone's talking about. The waitress pianist. There's even a reporter from the local paper. After he left, Maria took several deep breaths to calm herself. Just like any other performance, she whispered. Just like at the diner. But it wasn't like the diner. When Maria stepped onto the stage an hour later, she was met with a sea of faces in a proper concert hall. The lights were bright, the atmosphere formal. She recognized some familiar faces. Jack and the diner staff seated together, her mother in the front row, several of her students with their families, and Eleanor watching attentively from the side. Maria took her seat at the piano, adjusted the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The hall fell silent. She began with Haydn, a classical piece with clear structure and elegant phrases. As she played, she felt the initial tension in her shoulders ease. The hours of practice took over, her fingers finding each note with precision and sensitivity. From Haydn, she moved to Chopin, more romantic, more emotional. She thought of all the early mornings spent playing in her apartment, of the night Jack discovered her at the diner piano, of the faces of her young students when they mastered a difficult passage. All these moments flowed into her music. For her final piece, she had chosen Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, the piece that had changed everything for her when Jack overheard her playing it. She poured everything into this performance, all the years of hidden talent, the struggle to balance responsibility with passion, the joy of rediscovery. When the final chord resonated through the hall, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the audience erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically. Maria stood and bowed, her eyes finding her mother's face in the front row, tears streaming down both their cheeks. Backstage after the concert, Maria was surrounded by well-wishers. Her students presented her with flowers. Jack gave her a bear hug, lifting her off her feet. Eleanor introduced her to several colleagues from the symphony, who complimented her performance warmly. A young woman with a press badge approached. "Maria Reyes, I'm from the City Tribune. Would you have time for a few questions? We'd love to do a feature story on you, from conservatory student to waitress to concert pianist. It's such an inspiring journey." Yes, I suppose so," Maria agreed, still dazed from the performance and the reception. "Great. First question. How does it feel to have your talent finally recognized after all these years?" Maria thought for a moment. "It feels like coming home to a place I never really left. Music has always been with me, even when no one else could hear it. And will you continue working at the diner now that your music career is taking off?" Maria smiled. "Absolutely. Caldwell's is part of who I am too. I'm not choosing between worlds anymore, I'm bringing them together." Later that evening, Maria and her mother sat at their kitchen table, sharing a celebratory cake that Lily had baked. "I have news," her mother said, setting down her fork. "Dr. Wilson says the new treatment is working better than expected. My latest test results show significant improvement." Maria reached across the table to squeeze her mother's hand. "That's wonderful, Mom, the best news possible." "There's more," her mother continued. "Remember Mrs. Lowenstein, your first piano teacher? I ran into her husband at the pharmacy last week. She's retiring next year and looking for someone to take over her private students. He said she'd love to talk with you about it." Taking over Mrs. Lowenstein's studio? Maria felt a rush of emotion. Her first teacher, the woman who had seen potential in a 7-year-old girl from a working-class family, was offering to pass the torch. "Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it?" her mother said softly. The next morning, Maria woke before dawn as usual. She sat at her piano in the quiet apartment, playing as the first light of day filtered through the windows. But something was different. For the first time in years, she wasn't playing to hold on to a dream that seemed to be slipping away. She was playing as a prelude to a day filled with possibility. At 7 a.m., she arrived at Caldwell's for her shift. The bell jingled as she pushed open the door. "There she is," Jack called out. "Our very own concert pianist." The regular customers looked